5-hour 07 a.m. December 12, 2025, off the coast of Libya. A 500-foot column of black smoke surged into the Mediterranean sky. What it rose from had been the Kendall, a Russian Shadow Fleet vessel worth roughly $50 million, loaded with thousands of Iranian drone components. Moscow treated it like a floating fortress. Nearly 100,000 tons of steel, sitting about 250 miles from the front lines. In their minds, that made it untouchable. They planned their winter offensive around that belief. They were wrong. In seconds, Ukraine did more than sink a ship. It shattered Russian naval confidence and forced a painful rewrite of modern maritime warfare. This was not luck. It was a calculated strike that exposed how fragile Moscow's assumptions had become. To see how this turned into a strategic nightmare, rewind the clock about 6 hours. We are in international waters off Libya, the Wild West of global shipping. Drifting there was the Kendall. To an untrained eye, it looked like a rust-streaked flag of convenience commercial vessel. About 820 feet of steel riding the swells. That flag was fiction. This was a classic Russian Shadow Fleet tanker operating off the books and beyond sanctions. And it was not hauling bananas. It was carrying the backbone of Russia's drone war, floating in open water, under the assumption no one would dare touch it. That assumption did not survive the morning. You are watching Titan Navy. If you want clear naval and battlefield analysis, like the video, subscribe, and stay with us. Satellite analysis indicated that beneath the deck, hidden inside perfectly ordinary shipping containers, sat the Kremlin's lifeline. Thousands of components for Shahed attack drones quietly transferred ship to ship under cover of darkness. That single cargo hold alone was worth more than $50 million, enough to keep Russia's drone campaign alive for months. Up on deck, the Russian crew looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Cigarettes, idle chatter, maybe thoughts of a generous bonus once the cargo was delivered. And from their perspective, why not? They were about 250 miles from the nearest Ukrainian naval base. In their heads, they were safer than a career politician sealed inside a bunker. They believed the war was far away. They were wrong. The war was sitting about 50 miles off their starboard bow. Drifting quietly nearby was what appeared to be a harmless commercial trawler, the kind you'd expect to see hauling tuna nets. That was no fishing boat. That was Ukraine's mothership. Inside a climate-controlled windowless compartment, a team of elite SBU operators sat strapped into high-end VR headsets, silent and focused. They weren't battling waves or sea spray. They were holding game controllers. It looked absurd on the surface, like the opening moments of a video game session. But this wasn't entertainment. This was a fight with no respawns. Their avatars were already waiting below deck. A wolf pack of 5 Magura V-5C naval drones. And mounted above them on launch rails were 6 heavy-lift Baba Yaga aerial bomber drones positioned to deliver the final blow. The trap was already closed. The mothership's hatch hissed open. Pilots flexed their fingers. The flight commander gave a simple nod. Kick the door down. At the stern waterline, hydraulic hatches slid apart. 2 Magura V-5C drones slipped into the dark Mediterranean. These weren't stealth units. These were the bait. Ukrainian engineers had deliberately modified their exhaust systems and bolted on radar reflectors. The goal was simple: make them look and sound like warships on Russian sensors. Electric starters whined, then the engines erupted. 18-foot Greyhounds surged forward, hitting 45 knots in seconds, ripping white scars through black water. They weren't hiding. They wanted to be seen. They were charging straight down the Kendall's throat. On the bridge of the Russian ship, the calm night shattered instantly. the commercial navigation radar, normally blind to low-profile surface drones, suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. Alarms screamed. Contact starboard bow. 2 high-speed targets 2 miles and closing. The Russian captain spilled his coffee. Panic set in. He shouted for the defense teams. This Shadow Fleet vessel had been retrofitted with twin 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine guns on deck, brutal Soviet-era hardware designed to turn light vehicles into shredded metal. As the Muras crossed the 1-mile mark, Ukrainian pilots staring through VR headsets pushed their sticks forward and initiated an S-turn evasion pattern. They were taunting the bear. On the Kendall, the gunners opened fire. The heavy machine guns spat long tongues of flame tracers ripping through the darkness. It looked like a laser show at a bargain basement nightclub, except every streak of light was an armor-piercing slug, the size of a thumb traveling at roughly 300 to 200 feet per second. Water erupted around the lead Mura in towering geysers. The pilot yanked the controller left, then snapped hard right. The drone banked 45 degrees, skipped across a wave, and dodged the stream of steel by inches. This was a high-stakes game of chicken. But the Russians weren't aiming at the drone itself. They were firing barrage patterns, filling the approach with a wall of metal. At 800 yards, physics caught up. A 14.5mm round slammed into the lead Mura's bow. The kinetic energy transferred instantly, shattering the fiberglass hull. A massive fireball lit up the ocean, turning night into day for a split second. The second Magura tried to dive beneath the smokescreen of its fallen partner. A smart move on paper. But the Russian gunners were locked in now. They walked their fire across the water. 3 rounds tore through the engine block. The second drone cartwheeled, disintegrated, and detonated in a spectacular shower of burning fuel and shattered composite. Silence fell back over the Mediterranean. On the deck of the Kendall, Russian sailors erupted in cheers. High fives all around. The captain wiped sweat from his forehead, staring at the burning slicks spreading across the surface. In their minds, they had just won their own version of the Battle of the Atlantic. Threat neutralized. Mission saved. Somewhere, a radio message to Moscow practically wrote itself. Attack repelled. But 50 miles away, inside the Ukrainian mothership, no one was mourning. The pilots were smiling, because they had just gotten exactly what they paid for. They knew 3 things the Russians didn't. First, the gunners had overheated their barrels to the edge of warping. Second, every eye on that ship was now locked onto the burning water, wrecking their night vision. And third, the real attack hadn't even begun yet. It had been exactly 45 seconds since the Maguras exploded. The perfect window. Launch the Babas, the commander ordered. 6 massive rotors spun up. The first wave of 3 Baba Yaga heavy bomber drones lifted into the night sky. These were not toy drones. These were hexacopters the size of a kitchen table built to haul payloads heavy enough to make a mule struggle. Tonight, they were carrying unguided PG-7VL anti-tank grenades. They climbed to 1,000 Hardsutter-FT electric motors, humming with a low, predatory buzz. And here was the trick. The mothership launched them on a high ballistic arc. They weren't trying to stay invisible. They wanted to be noticed eventually. Back on the Kendall, the euphoria was fading into unease. Smoke from the burning Maguras drifted across the deck, stinging eyes and blurring the horizon. Then a lookout on the bridge wing screamed air contact, high-angle zenith. His fingers shook as he pointed upward. Above them, thermal signatures were dropping fast. The Baba Yagas had cut their motors. They were in a terminal dive, trading altitude for speed, falling like stones straight toward the ship. Chaos erupted. The Russian gunners, who had just spent 5 minutes firing downward at the water, now had to crank their heavy KPVT mounts violently skyward. Gears screamed in protest. The barrels were still smoking hot, throwing heat shimmer that warped their optical sights. On the upper deck, a Russian Marine scrambled and shouldered an Igla manpads. He aimed at the falling shadows, waiting for the lock tone. Nothing. The drones were dropping too fast. Their electric motors were too cold for the infrared seeker to lock. No lock, no lock, he shouted, tossing the $20,000 missile aside and grabbing his AK-74 instead. On the bridge, an officer slammed his fist onto the electronic warfare console. Jam them. Full power. The Volts system flooded the spectrum with radio noise, trying to sever the link between the drones and their Starlink relay. It worked partially. The first drone lost stability inside the electronic storm. It wobbled, clipped a rotor on a cable stay, and spun out of control, crashing into the C-200 wide eye off the port beam. The second drone pushed through the interference. It dropped its payload blind. The grenade screamed downward, missed the bridge, and slammed into a shipping container on the foredeck. It wasn't a ship-killing hit, but it blew the container doors clean off. Shards of metal rattled across the superstructure, forcing every Russian head down instinctively. The third Baba Yaga was the sacrificial lamb. It dove straight for the radar mast. The KPVT gunners finally found their lead. A 14.5mm round tore through the drone's battery pack. It detonated mid-air, raining burning lithium cells onto the deck below. The captain was convinced now. In his mind, he had just proven himself a naval genius. He had beaten a surface attack. He had beaten an air attack. His electronic shield, he believed, was untouchable. But he was missing the larger picture. While every Russian eye was locked on the sky, while every jammer was pointed upward, three dark shapes were slipping through the waves, silent low and closing fast. And unlike the aerial drones, these machines did not care about radio jamming. Inside the mothership, the flight commander wasn't celebrating. He watched three green dots on his screen cross the red line 2 miles from the target. Execute split. Release the swarm. Out in the black water, the final 3 Mura V-5 drones surged forward. But this time, they did not charge in a straight line. Without warning, the 2 flanking Muras broke formation, peeling hard left and right, carving wide arcs away from the ship. The center Mura stayed on course, charging straight down the middle, screaming for attention. On the Kendall, the radar operator froze. Target splitting. What are they doing? Before anyone could answer the flanking, Muras slowed. Their top hatches snapped open, like the bomb bay doors of a B-52. From the belly of each sea drone, 4 small, angry shapes lifted off. 8 quadcopter FPV drones rose from floating launch pads. These were not ordinary drones. Trailing behind each one was a hair-thin strand of fiber optic cable, unspooling smoothly from a reel inside the Mura. That cable changed everything. The Russian electronic warfare officer saw the new contacts bloom on his scope and sneered. More toys. Burn them. He cranked the Volts jammer to maximum output. Broadband noise flooded the air, powerful enough to fry receivers and disrupt signals miles away. Invisible waves of electromagnetic energy blasted outward. The crew waited for the drones to drop from the sky like dead insects. They didn't. Through the VR headsets aboard the mothership, the video feed stayed crystal clear. 1080p resolution. 0 lag. No static. The pilots could see individual rivets on the ship's hull. Jamming was useless. The EW officer shouted, panic breaking through his voice. They're not stopping. Why aren't they stopping? Because you can't jam glass with radio waves. Trying to stop a fiber optic drone with electronic warfare is like trying to stop a train by yelling at it. The swarm accelerated to 90 meter, splitting into pairs. The central Mura absorbed the punishment, drawing heavy machine gun fire, taking round after round, sacrificing itself to keep eyes and guns pointed forward. While the Russians focused on the surface threat, the silent second wave of 3 Baba Yaga bombers was already overhead unnoticed, slipping into their final dive. The Russian captain looked out from the bridge. He saw death racing toward him from the water. He saw death falling out of the sky. And for the first time, he understood the truth. His $50 million ship was defenseless against a spool of cable thinner than fishing line. The trap had not just snapped shut, it had locked. What followed on the Kendall was no longer a battle. It was overload. It starts with the swarm. The 2 flanking Mura V5s snap their hatches open, and 8 fiber-optic FPV drones scream into the air. The Russians are not quitting. The captain bellows over the PA, ordering every able-bodied man to the rails. Cooks, engineers, officers. Everyone grabs an AK-74 or a flare gun. The deck of the Kendall erupts in small arms fire, a frantic wall of lead clawing at the night. The first pair of FPVs charges for the bridge. A Russian Marine on the wing deck keeps his nerve. He leads the target cleanly with a PKM machine gun. Tracers rip through the first drone, shredding its plastic frame. It corkscrews and smashes harmlessly into a crane. The second drone jinks hard, then flies straight into a cloud of signal flares fired by the crew. The blinding magnesium glare washes out the pilot's camera. He loses orientation and slams into the superstructure. Russia 2, Ukraine 0. Meanwhile, the 2 flanking Muras, now empty of their drone cargo, do not drift away. They accelerate. These are no longer carriers, they are suicidal decoys. They charge the ship's bow and stern engines, screaming. The heavy KPVT gunners see the large surface targets, and instinct takes over. Barrels swing down. 14.5mm rounds tear into the empty Muras. One detonates in a gasoline fireball, the other disintegrates into fiberglass splinters. The gunners cheer. They think they have stopped the main threat. They took the bait. By fixating on the empty carriers and the buzzing FPVs, they leave the waterline wide open. The remaining FPVs dive with purpose, not to sink the ship, but to blind it. They slam into radar arrays and spotlight clusters. Glass shatters. The deck plunges into darkness. The KPVT gunners are now firing blind muzzle flashes, strobing terrified faces. This is the opening the Baba Yaga bombers were waiting for. The first Baba Yaga dives from above, trying to strafe the bridge with a grenade drop. A KPVT gunner spraying wildly into the sky gets lucky. A heavy slug shears off a rotor arm. The massive drone spins out of control and crashes into the sea, vanishing in a burst of white foam. The second Baba Yaga goes for the communications mast, but the sheer volume of desperate AK fire is overwhelming. Rounds punch into its battery pack. It ignites mid-air and falls like a burning meteor onto the foredeck, where crewmen scramble to kick the wreckage overboard. While every eye is dragged upward by flaming debris, the central Mura V5 makes its move. This one is the heavy hitter loaded with 1,000 pounds of high explosive. It punches the throttle and covers the last 400 yards in seconds. A sharp-eyed sailor spots the wake and screams a warning, raising his rifle. A 5.45mm round against a hardened sea drone is like throwing a pebble at a tank. The Mura slams into the Kendall amidships right at the waterline. The explosion is tectonic. It tears a hole the size of a garage door through the double hull. Seawater floods the hold, instantly heeling the massive ship 10 degrees to port. The shockwave throws sailors off their feet. Rifle fire dies in an instant. And then comes the coup de grace. The third and final Baba Yaga hovers silently in the blind spot, carved out by smoke and darkness. Through the camera, the pilot sees exactly what the blast has exposed. The cargo hold is open. The hatch covers are gone. He pushes the throttle to maximum. He isn't dropping a bomb. He is the bomb. The massive hexacopter laden with thermite charges enters a terminal dive straight into the ship's belly. On the bridge, the captain claws his way back to the window, just in time to see the shadow plummeting into his ship. The Baba Yaga smashes into a crate marked agricultural parts. The impact triggers the thermite burning at 4,000 degrees. It melts through the steel and touches the lithium batteries of the smuggled Shahed drones. The white glow turns into a sun. The first container cooks off, triggering a chain reaction that tears the Kendall apart from the inside out. The pilots on the mothership watch in silence as the Mediterranean night turns into day. They didn't just sink a ship, they erased it. What do you think? Will we see more mothership raids like this? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales from the front lines of modern warfare. Bye for now. 5:07 a.m. December 12, 2025, off the coast of Libya. That 500 FT column of black smoke rising from the Mediterranean that used to be the Kendall, a Russian shadow fleet vessel worth $50 million packed to the brim with thousands of Iranian drone parts. Moscow thought this 100,000-ton fortress was untouchable, won 250 Mertzament from the front lines. They bet their entire winter offensive on this shipment being safe. They were dead wrong. In a split second, Ukraine didn't just sink a ship. They rewrote naval history forever. Here is how they pulled off the impossible. To understand this absolute disaster for the Kremlin, we have to rewind the clock about 6 hours. We are in the international waters off Libya, a place I like to call the Wild West of the shipping world. Floating there is the Kendall. To the untrained eye, she's just a rusty Oman-flagged commercial vessel, 820 FT of steel bobbing in the swells. But that flag is a lie. This is a classic shadow fleet tanker, a ghost ship operating off the books. And she isn't carrying bananas. Satellite scans suggest that below her decks, tucked inside innocent-looking shipping containers, sits the Kremlin's lifeline, thousands of components for Shahed attack drones transferred ship to ship under the cover of darkness. This single cargo haul is worth over $50 million, enough to keep Russia's campaign running for months. The Russian crew on deck were relaxing, probably smoking cigarettes, and dreaming of a fat bonus check. And why wouldn't they? They were 250 miles away from the nearest Ukrainian naval base. In their minds, they were safer than a politician in a bunker. They thought the war was a world away. But they were wrong. The war was exactly 50 meters 6 meters off their starboard bow. Drifting quietly in the waves was what looked like a harmless commercial trawler, the kind you'd see fishing for tuna. This was Ukraine's secret weapon, the mothership. Inside a climate-controlled windowless compartment on this trawler, a squad of elite SBU operators sat in silence, strapped into high-end VR headsets. They weren't fighting the cold or the sea spray. They were holding game controllers, literally looking like they were about to start a round of Call of Duty. But the game they were playing had 0 respawns. Their avatars were waiting in the belly of the ship, a wolf pack of 5 Magura V-5C drones. And hanging on the launch rails above them, 6 heavy-lift aerial Baba Yaga bomber drones ready to deliver the knockout punch. The trap was set. The mothership's hatch hissed open, and the pilots flexed their fingers. It was time to play. The flight commander gives the nod. Kick the door down. At the stern waterline, hydraulic hatches hiss open. Two Mura V-5C drones slide into the dark Mediterranean swells. These aren't the stealthy ones. These are the loudmouths. Ukrainian engineers have tweaked their exhaust manifolds and bolted on radar reflectors. They want these things to look and sound like battleships on the Russian scopes. The electric starter motors whine, and then the engines roar to life. These 18 FT Greyhounds punch the throttle, accelerating to 45 knots in seconds, carving white scars into the black water. They aren't hiding. They are charging straight down the Kendall's throat. On the bridge of the Russian ship, the calm night instantly shatters. The commercial navigation radar, usually blind to low-profile drones, suddenly lights up like a Christmas tree. The alarms scream. Contact starboard bow. Two high-speed targets, 2 miles, and closing. The Russian captain spills his coffee. Panic. He screams for the defense teams. This Shadow Fleet vessel has been retrofitted with twin 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine guns on the deck. Nasty Soviet hardware designed to turn light vehicles into Swiss cheese. The Muras cross the 1-mile mark. Through the VR headsets, the Ukrainian pilots push the sticks forward, initiating an S-turn evasion pattern. They are taunting the bear. On the Kendall, the gunners open up. The heavy machine guns spit tongues of fire, sending tracers streaking through the dark. It's like a laser show at a cheap nightclub, but every beam of light is an armor-piercing slug, the size of your thumb, moving at 3,200 FT per second. The water around the lead Mura erupts in geysers. The pilot yanks the controller left, then hard right. The drone banks 45 degrees, skipping over a wave, dodging the stream of lead by inches. It's a high-stakes game of chicken, but the Russians are using barrage fire. They aren't aiming at the drone. They are filling the air with a wall of steel. At 800 yards, physics catches up. A 14.5mm round slams into the lead Mura's bow. The kinetic energy transfers instantly, shattering the fiberglass hull. A massive fireball illuminates the ocean, turning night into day for a split second. The second Magura tries to dive under the smokescreen of its fallen brother. Smart move, but the Russian gunners are dialed in now. They walk their fire across the water. 3 rounds tear through the engine block. The second drone cartwheels, disintegrates and explodes in a spectacular shower of burning gasoline and plastic. Silence returns to the Mediterranean. On the deck of the Kendall, the Russian sailors are cheering. They are high-fiving. The captain wipes sweat from his forehead, looking at the burning oil slicks on the water. They think they just won the Battle of the Atlantic. They think the threat is neutralized. Good shooting, boys, the captain probably radios to Moscow. Attack repelled. But inside the mothership, 50 miles away, the Ukrainian pilots aren't mourning. They are grinning because they just got exactly what they paid for. They know 3 things the Russians don't. 1, the Russians just heated up their gun barrels to the point of warping. 2, every eye on that ship is now fixated on the burning water, ruining their night vision. And 3, the real attack hasn't even started yet. It's been exactly 45 seconds since the Maguras exploded. The perfect window. Launch the Babas, the commander orders. 6 massive rotors spin up. The first wave of 3 Baba Yaga heavy bomber drones lifts off into the night sky. These aren't your kids' toy drones. These are hexacopters the size of a kitchen table, capable of lifting payloads that would make a mule buckle. Tonight they are carrying unguided PG-7VL anti-tank grenades. They climb to 1,000 feet, their electric motors humming a low, menacing buzz. But here is the trick. The mothership launches them on a high ballistic arc. They aren't trying to be stealthy. They want to be seen eventually. Back on the Kendall, the euphoria is fading into a nervous buzz. The smoke from the burning Maguras is drifting across the deck, stinging eyes and obscuring the horizon. Suddenly, a lookout on the bridge wing screams, "Air contact, high-angle zenith." He points a shaking finger at the sky. Above them, thermal signatures are descending fast. The Baba Yagas have cut their motors and are in a terminal dive trading altitude for speed, plummeting like stones toward the ship's deck. Chaos erupts. The Russian gunners, who just spent 5 minutes shooting down at the water, now have to crank their heavy KPVT mounts violently upward. The gears grind. The barrels are still smoking hot, creating heat shimmers that distort their optical sights. A Russian Marine on the upper deck scrambles, throwing an Igla manpads onto his shoulder. He aims at the falling shadows, waiting for the tone. Nothing. The drones are dropping too fast. Their electric motors too cold for the infrared seeker to lock onto. "No lock, no lock," he screams, tossing the $20 missile aside and grabbing his AK-74. The bridge officer slams his fist on the EW console. Jam them full power. The Vol's system blasts radio noise on all frequencies, trying to sever the link between the drones and their Starlink relay. It works partially. The first drone loses stability in the electronic storm. It wobbles, catches a rotor on a cable stay, and spins wildly into the sea 200 yards off the port beam. The second drone fights through the interference. It drops its payload blind. The grenade whistles down, missing the bridge, but slamming into a shipping container on the foredeck. It's not a ship-killing blow, but it blows the doors off the container. Metal shrapnel pings off the superstructure, forcing every Russian head to duck. The third Baba Yaga is the sacrificial lamb. It dives straight for the radar mast. The KPVT gunners finally find their mark. A 14.5 millimeter round shears through its battery pack. The drone explodes in mid-air, raining burning lithium cells onto the deck. The captain is now convinced he is a naval genius. He has defeated a sea attack. He has defeated an air attack. He believes his electronic shield is impenetrable. But he's missing the bigger picture. While every Russian eye was glued to the clouds and every jammer was pointed at the sky, 3 dark shapes were slipping through the waves, silent low and closing fast. And unlike the aerial drones, these machines don't care about radio jamming. Inside the mothership, the flight commander isn't celebrating. He's watching 3 green dots on his screen cross the red line 2 miles from the target. Execute split. Release the swarm. Out in the dark water, the final 3 Mura V5 drones are rushing in. But this time, they don't charge in a straight line. Suddenly, the 2 flanking Muras break formation. They peel off hard left and right, carving wide arcs away from the ship. The central Mura keeps charging straight up the middle, screaming for attention. On the Kendall, the radar operator is confused. Target splitting. What are they doing? Before he can answer, the flanking Muras slow down. Their top hatches pop open like the bay doors of a B-52 bomber. From inside the belly of each sea drone, 4 small, angry shadows rise up. 8 quadcopter FPV drones lift off from their floating launch pads. These aren't normal drones. Trailing behind each one is a hair-thin strand of fiber optic cable, unspooling from a reel inside the Magura. This is the game changer. The Russian EW officer sees the new contacts on his scope. He sneers. More toys. Burn them. He cranks the VOR-Z jammer to maximum output. Broadband noise fries their receivers. Invisible waves of electromagnetic energy blast out from the ship, powerful enough to knock a commercial airliner off course. The Russian crew waits for the drones to drop out of the sky like dead flies. But the drones just keep coming. Through the VR headsets on the mothership, the video feed is crystal clear. 1080p resolution, zero lag, no static. The pilots can see individual rivets on the ship's hull. Jamming ineffective. The EW officer screams panic, cracking his voice. They aren't stopping. Why aren't they stopping? Because you can't jam a glass cable with radio waves, comrade. It's like trying to stop a train by yelling at it. The swarm of 8 FPVs accelerates to 90 mph. They split into pairs. The central Marura is drawing the heavy machine gun fire, absorbing rounds, sacrificing itself to clear the path. Meanwhile, the silent second wave of 3 Baba Yaga bombers is already overhead unnoticed in the chaos entering their final dive. The Russian captain looks out his window. He sees death coming from the water. He sees death coming from the air. And for the first time he realizes his $50 million ship is defenseless against a spool of fishing line. The trap hasn't just snapped, it is locked shut. The next 60 seconds on the Kendall aren't a battle. They are a sensory overload. It starts with the swarm. The 2 flanking Muras pop their hatches and 8 fiber optic FPV drones scream into the air. But the Russians aren't giving up. The captain screams over the PA system, ordering every able-bodied man to the rails. Cooks, engineers, officers, everyone grabs an AK-74 or a flare gun. The deck of the Kendall erupts in small arms fire. It's a wall of lead. The first pair of FPVs tries to rush the bridge. A Russian Marine on the wing deck doesn't panic. He leads the target perfectly with his PKM machine gun. Tracers tear through the first drone, shredding its plastic frame. It spins out and smashes harmlessly into a crane. The second drone jinks hard, but flies straight into a cloud of signal flares fired by the crew. The blinding magnesium light washes out the pilot's camera. He loses orientation and slams into the superstructure. Russia 2, Ukraine 0. Meanwhile, the 2 flanking Muras, now empty of their drone cargo, don't just float away. They accelerate, turning into suicidal decoys. They charge the ship's bow and stern engines, whining. The heavy KPVT gunners, seeing these massive targets, swing their barrels instinctively. 14.5mm rounds tear into the empty Maguras. One explodes in a fireball of gasoline. The other disintegrates into fiberglass splinters. The gunners cheer, thinking they've stopped the main threat, but they took the bait. By focusing on the empty carriers and the buzzing FPVs, they left the waterline wide open. The remaining FPVs dive aggressively, not to kill the ship, but to blind it. They suicide dive into the radar arrays and the spotlight clusters. Glass shatters. The deck goes dark. The heavy KPVT gunners are now firing blind into the night, their muzzle flashes illuminating their terrified faces. This is the moment the 3 Baba Yaga bombers make their move, diving from the darkness above. The first one tries to strafe the bridge with a grenade drop, but a KPVT gunner firing wildly into the air gets lucky. A heavy slug shears off a rotor arm. The massive drone spins violently out of control and crashes into the sea, vanishing in a splash of white foam. The second Baba Yaga attempts to target the communications mast, but the sheer volume of AK fire from the desperate crew is too much. Bullets riddle its battery pack. It bursts into flames mid-air, falling like a burning meteor onto the foredeck, where crewmen scramble to kick the wreckage overboard. While the crew is distracted by the burning debris falling from the sky, the central Mura V5, the heavy hitter loaded with 1,000 ibad of high explosives, punches the throttle. It covers the last 400 yards in seconds. A sharp-eyed Russian sailor spots the wake. He screams a warning, aiming his rifle, but a 5.45mm bullet against a hardened sea drone is like throwing a pebble at a tank. The Magura impacts the Kendall amidships right at the waterline. The explosion is tectonic. It punches a hole the size of a garage door through the double hull. Seawater rushes into the hold, instantly lifting the massive ship 10 degrees to port. The shockwave knocks every sailor on deck off their feet. The AK fire stops, but the coup de grace comes from the third and final Baba Yaga. Hovering silently in the blind spot created by the smoke, the pilot sees the exposed cargo hold, where the explosion blew the hatch covers off. He pushes the throttle to maximum. He isn't dropping a bomb. He is the bomb. The massive hexacopter laden with thermite charges enters a terminal dive straight into the ship's belly. On the bridge, the captain claws his way back to the window just in time to see the shadow plummeting into his ship. The Baba Yaga smashes into a crate marked agricultural parts. The impact triggers the thermite burning at 4,000 degrees. It melts through the steel and touches the lithium batteries of the smuggled Shahed drones. The white glow turns into a sun. The first container cooks off, triggering a chain reaction that tears the Kendall apart from the inside out. The pilots on the mothership watch in silence as the Mediterranean night turns into day. They didn't just sink a ship, they erased it. What do you think? Will we see more mothership raids like this? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales from the front lines of modern warfare. Bye for now.